Are we about to witness the next evolution for the sport of boxing? Will it be its most grown-up era yet? The reason I ask, and Spencer, you're all over this, as is Simon, Turki Alalshikh over in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and TKO have signed a multi-year partnership to establish a new boxing promotion with an executive leadership team headed up by the UFC president, very impressive individual, Dana White, and WWE president Nick Khan. Turki Alalshikh and Dana White made the announcement just in the last few hours.
What's up, guys? We have just done a deal to start a new boxing league with Turkey, who absolutely loves the sport of boxing.
I am very happy today. I give the flag of boxing to the best man who can handle it. He have a tough job now, but I am sure he will be delivering to the people and the fans the magnificent league and get boxing great again.
The model is proven to deliver the fights that the fans want to see. The best will fight the best, and the fighters will continue to move up the rankings and become world champions. We will continue to make announcements on where you can watch and all the rest of the details on the business as we get closer to the launch. I'll see you soon.
Wow. I mean, Simon, this is seismic, isn't it? Dana White has shown time and time again in the road to UFC, he knows what he's about. Turki Alalshikh has absolutely exploded onto the scene of boxing.
He has.
And it makes the fights that the people want to see, as Spencer has said, week in, week out.
He does.
So these two as a force together, what are we about to witness?
Look, I mean, this is an industry that lends itself to these sort of opportunities because the Saudis have wanted to change the direction of certain sports, whether it be the golf and the arguments around the live golfing situation, or whether it be football. They can't quite do it in those sports because the governance, the guidelines, the structure, the establishment of those sports are more established, better put together. Whereas in this sport, it's the Wild West. We know all the challenges. We know that the industry isn't held together by coherency. We know that there's not a consistency of governance. And we also know that there's a variety of different challenges, whether it be how drugs tests are put across the industry, or whether it be how disciplines are enforced, or whether it be the sanctioning bodies and their conduct and the variety of champions. Everybody was very happy to embrace them. And of course their money coming into the sport has been very welcomely received. It's taken away the barrier to entry. No one has any excuse anymore not to fight, because the only reason they don't fight now is because they don't want to, not because they've got broadcasting conflicts or commercial and financial guidelines. They're all taken away. This is a typical powerful play by people. What you do is you go into an industry, you slightly weaken it, and then you're taking it over. They've weakened it by basically saying to everybody else, we're the only people that you need, which is they've proven to be the case.
Right.
So you've got Frank and you've got Eddie and you've got Callie and you've got Top Rank and you've got everybody else. This is a new addition. The detail, I mean, when I spoke to the fellow last week, this is not a new, everyone knew this was coming.
Are we allowed to say this? You'd have
we've spoken about it. We've spoken about it, yeah. And this is not something, he talks about the destruction of industries. He talks about the destruction of the broadcast platforms. He believes that they're going to own the content and that they're going to be able to force that content out to everybody else on the basis that the only people going to get the content that they are around boxing is people that have to ask him for it. So he's done a deal with owning DAZN. He'll probably stick some content on Netflix to ruffle DAZN's feathers. Ultimately, he'll do a variety of things. This boxing league adds another... Anybody that puts their head above the parapet and says they know what this is a liar, because they don't, because no one's been told yet. And I suspect that Dana and Turki Alalshikh don't quite know what it is at this moment in time. They know what they're aiming for and how they're going to achieve it, but they've got two things. They've got Dana White that knows how to do it, and they've got Turki Alalshikh's money. And they've got TKO, they've got plenty of dough as well.
And that combination, Spencer, could blow the whole thing wide open.
Absolutely. I think that what they're trying to achieve here is what they achieved in that UFC with that model of, one champion, one division, less divisions, but one champion of every division, instead of having your 4 champions that we've currently got with the WBC, WBA, IBF, WBO. They're going to make it one champion, and it's going to be then who that world champion is. It's the UFC model, basically, and taking it into the boxing world, which is going to work because I think it's going to reignite the appetite for boxing. If you look at in USA and how that's fallen in boxing in recent years. When you think that we never had a world heavyweight champion for over 50 years, now all of a sudden, like, we're dominant in the world heavyweight boxing scene, and you don't really see the Americans because the appetite over there has gone away, because they're now all into UFC. They're following that model because they trust in it. And I think what Turkey and the others are saying is that this is a model that will work, and it will give an appetite back in the sport.
He believes, and I don't know if he's right or wrong, that
Turki Alalshikh.
Turki Alalshikh, and I had this conversation with him about where they are as a sport and where the ceiling is and how big it can grow. And you look at the dominant sports. You look at soccer. You look at NFL. You look at NBA. You look at the National Hockey League. You look at Major League Baseball. You look at other sports like cricket, because of the geographic situation in India and Pakistan, how dominant those forces are. To make this one of the biggest sports in the world, I still think it's quite a parochial sport. He has ambitions for broadcasting content across a pantheon of places that's going to be ultimately about boxing, all about boxing, every day, all day, everywhere.
Well,
right? So he's got really big ambitions.
Yeah. But ultimately, do you think that it will be better in the long run, though?
Well,
I think that do you think that will attract more fans?
There's a lot of noise, right? If you believe that WBC, WBA, IBF, WBO, and whoever else of the Alphabet City are going to just disappear into the ether, then you're foolish. If you believe that Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn don't know about this, and this is some sort of revelation to them, they know about it, and how they fold into it and what it becomes is this discussion.
You see, that's a very good point you've just made, Simon. What does it mean for the likes of Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn? What does it mean for those who have gone before Turki Alalshikh and Dana White in this field? Now, you and Eddie Hearn went at it back in 2023 on the topic of Saudi Arabia potentially being able to turn the lights out on promoters like him.
We're in a halcyon period. These guys are getting fights made for them. They haven't got to do much. Just turn up and people can point at how much money they want to give them. Right? That's, to me, not much of a skill set. And it does make me wonder whether the end game for these guys with the Saudis is to look and say, well, what do we need these guys for? They're glorified agents. What do we need them for? We can own the fighters. We can talk direct to the fighters. We can have the relationship. We're the money. If I was the money in the room, unless there was a bloody good reason, why would I want to deal with Hearn and Warren? If I've got the ability to turn out their lights economically, what do I need them for?
Eddie, you're a glorified agent.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit harsh. I mean, we've got a huge business of running global sports, and the ability runs deeper than being a glorified agent and a deal maker. I mean, there's so many elements that go into the production of a major show. I mean, a few weeks ago we ran with Riyadh season the event in Los Angeles, where our matchroom team, which is 40 people, helped create an event that couldn't have been done without us in terms of the promotional ability, the infrastructure of the TV deals, licensing, dealing with the commission, dealing with, the local councils and government in terms of the red tape, safety requirements, drug testing. I mean, it's just the job is just incredible. And as the size of the shows increase, the nature of the job changes. This isn't a situation, as Simon said, of you just going in and doing a deal and taking a cut. Ourselves, Queensbury, Gold Star, is a huge amount of work, and the requirement of these people and the level that Turki Alalshikh requires, it's not just as easy just to do it yourself, because when you've been in the game for a long, long time, and I think he acknowledges as well, it's quite refreshing actually, he wants the ecosystem of boxing to keep thriving. Riyadh season alone is not going to keep the ecosystem of boxing alive in the same way.
But all these things that Eddie says, because it takes to go into a major promotion, and they do it, and they do it very well, and they probably do. The new kids in the block, Turkey and Dana White, and the people that will work for them, will do just that too.
But when I saw this discussion I had with Eddie the other day, I looked at it out of curiosity, because I knew this conversation, I knew what Turkey was going to announce, I knew this conversation was coming out this week. And I looked at it, and one of the things I said was about acquired knowledge. If you can acquire the knowledge, let's have a look at it, right? In 18 months, this fella now is Mr. Boxing. How difficult for him was it to him, all these moving parts, all these leading influences, all these wonderful luminaries that apparently run boxing. Who's the king of boxing now? Who run boxing? Turki Alalshikh. Why? Because he's got more money than everybody else, and he's not being bogged down by what he thinks is a bureaucracy. So my point with Eddie in that conversation was, if he can acquire the knowledge to be the person that makes all the fights, believe me, he can acquire the knowledge of how to put a tent up, and organise a promotional event and be able to how to deal with the various sanctioning bodies and so on and so forth. So what I think will happen is I think the leading lights will fold down into something. I think you'll see the brilliant people like George Warren, who I think is the most effective operator in boxing, being involved in doing things with Salah and with the Saudis, and that's how I think it will evolve.
Boxing fans getting in touch with us this lunchtime, actually, with their own view of what this new look may indeed comprise of. Turki Alalshikh, of course, joining forces with Dana White, and the whole landscape changes. But what will it look like? What might it look like for Messrs Hearn and Warren? We're going to take some calls, but not until about half past the hour. We'll take some calls on that, because many of you want your say on this, and we're delighted that we will accommodate you on that. The changing face of boxing, and it is changing. Of that, there is no doubt. Get your calls in 03717 223344. Before we go any further, we always welcome calls on this show, and today is no exception. And of course, many of you want to give us your thoughts on this developing story regarding Turki Alalshikh over in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, signing a multi-year partnership with TKO. And that means Turki Alalshikh joining forces with Dana White, and now the whole landscape of boxing is set to change. Many of you want to get your say on this. While we have the company of Spencer Oliver in studio with Simon and myself. Kane is a big Liverpool fan, no doubt. Kane a big boxing fan as well. What do you think is about to happen? Are we going to see these two take over boxing in a global sense, and the whole sport changes forever?
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you very much for taking my call, Simon. I hope your leg improves.
Thank you, mate.
Soon. No worries at all. I just wanted to say that I think it's very important to raise the WWE aspect of the TKO merger. Simon mentioned on his interview with Eddie, or rather Eddie mentioned about the production aspect. I assume it's going to be TKO that handles all of the production. If you look at WrestleMania, that's a two-night event nowadays, brings in over 150,000 fans in. It's almost bigger than anything boxing could conjure up if you look at boxing's big events at Wembley Stadium. Even AEW, the second biggest promotion in wrestling, managed to put 89,000 people in Wembley. So I think all the production aspect is going to be handled by TKO, and I've got a prediction for you, gentlemen. I think by the end of the year, or possibly before, almost definitely before the World Cup, we will see an event under the TKO umbrella with the UFC, boxing and WWE all showcased in Riyadh under the same TKO umbrella. That's what I can envisage with this.
Well, it's not a bad prediction, Kane. And if that happens, you're talking about a powerhouse, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
changes everything, Simon.
Well, it was always a slightly flawed argument that Eddie advanced, that ultimately the knowledge that they're putting on events was something that they would retain their value in. You've now got people that put on bigger and better events that are going to have the intellectual capital to be able to create it. But this idea that somehow it'll be the end of Frank Warren or the end of Eddie Hearn, I think is rather silly. First of all, Eddie has got significant investment into his business in the hundreds of millions. He's got diversified assets, whether it's darts or snooker, and boxing also. And everyone will fold down into something, and we'll see. But what the most important thing is that it keeps on advancing boxing. It keeps on keeping boxing at the front of people's conversations, or in the conversation regularly.
Yeah, but
repeatedly.
do you see the Saudis, i.e. Turki Alalshikh, buying out Matchroom, buying out Queensberry?
Possibly. What they're buying and why they need to buy it, who knows? If you're going to be able to take control of something, why would you pay a premium for something you can get anyway?
Yeah.
The balance is what you do with these businesses, what their value is. But, there's a long way. The tectonic plates were always going to shift because the money in the room has made the decision that it wants to do things in a certain way. And he wasn't subtle about it. He told everybody that this is what he wanted to do. And he had his long look at the business, looked around and see who the movers and shakers were and what they are and what the value is, had a good look. That's the impression I got from him last week. He's had a good look. And some of the things he says are not right and a little bit nonsense, and they're excitable, and he throws them around like confetti. And some of it is going to land. And this boxing league, how it's formulated. Yeah. There's one thing about the UFC. It came from Dana White picking up a franchise that was worth 2 and 6 and being able to have omnipotency over it, controlling everything of it. Boxing is an established framework. I think it's the Wild West in some respects, but it's got an established framework that is going to have to be broken down to create the game-changing methodologies that Turkey is alluding to. And how a boxing league works, I like it. I like formats. We said about a year, 18 months ago, if you can build tribal support behind boxing, whether it's by regions or by countries, you start to build in a different ingredient into boxing that's been before. I think that boxing's
been so long stuck in the mud, you know, that dinosaur sport. It hasn't evolved, it hasn't moved on. This is going to reinvent it, and I think that there is a home for that, and I think it will reignite it in many ways. And I think when you're talking about sort of Queensbury, Matchroom, and the other promoters that are around, you look at that and go, where is that? There's still a home for that. There'll still be a home for them, for sure. I just think that this is a new model, and a new model that will work.
The value's in the broadcasters. I mean, forget about it. Forget about what you think about the best fighting the best. The broadcasters are the ones that you have to have the relationship with. Now, given the fact that they've already bought 10% of DAZN, so that, you know, and whether Blavatnik wants to sell the full kit and caboodle or whatever they do, and whether he drops some content on Netflix, as long as you've got your broadcast relationship, then your format's coming behind it. Your opportunity exists.
Sure. Keith, before we crack on, we want to take your call, mate. You're a boxing fan. You're an Arsenal fan as well, so you'll be happy that your team scored a 7-goal TKO over PSV Eindhoven, were you not?
I was delighted, but of course they've got to finish the job, got to be professional, and it's only half time, so I'm not going to take anything for granted, even though you would expect us to go through. First of all, Simon, I wish you a speedy recovery. Your health is your wealth, and that goes without saying. Look, I love boxing, but one of my criticisms, and I've always said it when I've been on Seconds Out, which I do some stuff for, you want to watch sport because you want to know who the best is. And when you got all these millions of belts, intercontinental and all this nonsense, it makes a mockery of the sport. Unfortunately, where there's money, there's always issues. I mean, you've seen it in darts with the breakaway in darts. You've got even to a certain degree with this sport that I love, tennis. You know, you've got the ATP, the WTA, the ITF, etc., etc. But here's the issue, and I think certainly that Simon was right. I said it again a couple of years ago. When you've got all this money coming in from the Saudis, they can take it over, and they can muscle out your Frank Warrens and Eddie Hearns, despite what they say, because they've managed to sort of partner up, see how it's done, and then they can take the model themselves. However, and I think it's a great thing if you can change the governance in order to ensure a ranking system. But how do you do that ranking system? It's not like a tennis ranking system where you've got players playing every week for points. Fighters can only fight maximum, say, half a dozen times a year, and that never happens these days. How are you going to determine what ranks them? Is it going to be quality of opponent? Is it going to be the type of win you have against an opponent? Is it going to be depending on a unanimous decision, a majority decision, a split decision, a KO, a TKO, an away win, whatever?
Wow.
There are so many different determinants. It's going to be very difficult to determine how you rank these boxers, because I think that is going to be the biggest issue.
Well,
I think a point you've made there.
Yeah, I think what they're planning on doing, though, is having leagues and, you know, working up to that Premiership League, if you like, and they've got this WBC World Cup going on now that gives, you know, the grassroots more opportunity, and they go into a system where they, you know, the victor comes out and they get placed and whatnot. So I think that is exactly what they're planning on doing. You touched right on it there, because you go, how does that work with so many fighters in the world, and how do they get ranked? That's what they're doing with this World Cup that's coming around as well.
It's simpler than that. If we are lauding and applauding the UFC for constantly matching the best fighters and making the best fights, isn't that the blueprint?
But that's exactly what this World Cup is. It's like it doesn't necessarily mean you've got to be like two guys that are undefeated, 31 and 29.
Right,
it's the younger fighters as well, and that's how they progress and move on.
Keith, what
not protecting anyone.
You obviously know your stuff, mate. What is your take on this proposed first ever Boxing World Cup that would see 4 weight categories? For example, featherweight, super lightweight, middleweight, heavyweight, 128 athletes, 32 participants in each division, no draws, open scoring, instant replay. I mean, this is groundbreaking, isn't it?
Look, you know, you have to modernise the sport. I mean, you've had so many sort of discussions and arguments about scoring, etc. The whole sport needs to be cleaned up. Unfortunately, you know, ideas and different proposals of tournaments. I know Spencer's obviously got his tournament against Roy Jones, Britain against America. Yeah, there's different formats, but I think in people want to know who the best is ultimately. And I think the ranking system is great, but how you manage to rank them with there's so many determinants for a ranking, it's much more difficult in boxing than it is in any other sport. The formula. I think that's where you're going to be a problem.
That devil will be in the detail. And the irony of it, Keith, is that we've got a Conor Benn, Chris Eubank fight that's going to outsell most boxing matches in and around the globe, including the best of the best in the light heavies. And that defies the logic that we think exists, which is that people want to see the best versus the best. They want to see the most intrigue. That's what they want to see, to some extent, alongside the purists that understand the sport, that want to see the best versus the best.
Yeah. Keith, it was a great call. Thanks for taking time out with us.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.